Okay, thank you very much, Julia. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this special edition of the book club of the Medium Research Group. We are organizing this meeting once a month to discuss different articles, papers, books, and today we wanted to discuss this interesting book by Lev Manovich, and so we invited people even from other universities, and we know we have a lot of friends and colleagues who are very, very interested in this kind of research, so welcome. Today we have, so the order will be the following. I'm going to introduce the different participants, then I'm going to introduce the book, very short, and then we are going to start with the different presentations. So today the order will be different from this image. So our first intervention will be by Gabriela Sued. Gabriela is from Argentina, but she has a PhD from ITESO, sorry, from Tecnológico de Monterrey, ITESM, Instituto Tecnológico de Monterrey. She has the PhD there with a thesis about digital cultural objects, specifically Instagram, and now she's in a postdoc in the UNAM University in Mexico City. So welcome, Gabriela. The second intervention will be Frédéric Guerrero Solé. Frédéric is professor from our Department of Communication in Pompeu Fabra. He's subdirector of research and knowledge transfer, and he's the coordinator of the Polcom research group. Welcome, Frédéric. We also, after Frédéric, we have Manel Garim Boronat. He's also a professor from our department, from UPF. He's member of the Cinema and Medium Research Group. And finally, we have Francisco López del Castillo. He's a PhD, very young PhD in communication from our program. His research was a combination of semiotic analysis and computational analysis of news. And now he works in Rebol. It's a company very important in Barcelona and in Europe. It's a company dedicated to specialize in data analysis. So this is the people that will participate in this discussion about this book. And I'm going to introduce the book right now. I'm going to share my screen so we can start. Okay. Can you confirm me that you can see my presentation?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you very much, Julia. So we are going to talk about this book, but before talking about the book, I just want to contextualize Lev Manovich's production. He's very well known, so this is very, very short. I think the first important book published by Lev Manovich was The Language of New Media, published in 2001 by the MIT Press. In that moment, it was a very important book because it was one of the first, we can say, analysis of the new media, applying new categories. It's interesting because Manovich comes from traditional cinema language research, and he applied many of these things to the new things. So the book is very, very popular. It's a reference. This year will be 20 years old, but it's still very, very fresh as a book. And you can see there it was published in Spanish in 2005. Okay, then there are many other books, translations, but I want to mention this one, Soft Cinema. This is not a book, it's a DVD with a different kind of data narratives created by Lev Manovich. It's a DVD where, let's say, it's an audiovisual representation of interactive installations. So it's a video, there are different videos, and it was published in 2005. If you like it, we have a copy in the Pompeu Fabra library. And another book that for me is very important is Software Takes Command from 2013. It was published in Spanish by WOC Press in 2014. This is a book very close to my own research about evolution of software. And I think it's a book very important because it's a theoretical book, I guess. and it's more theoretical than methodological. That's important for the book that we are going to discuss today. And software tech command is important because I think he proposed to construct a media theory, not about media, but about software and data. So he moves the concept of media from the center of the theory, and he puts software there. And then we have the last book, Cultural Analytics. I think we have been waiting for the book for a long time because we knew that Lev Manovich was working in data visualization. We knew his previous researches on that, so we were expecting this book. According to Manovich, this is the definition of cultural analytics, is the use of computational and visualization method for the analysis of massive cultural data sets and flows. That's we can say the official definition of this new area or research area. According to him, the book is situated in the intersection of data science, media studies, and digital culture studies. So we are talking about transdisciplinarity. And the book is based on Manovich's explorations in cultural data analysis and visualization. Many of these projects were well known before the publication of the book, but now they're all together with a general analysis and proposal about how to work with cultural analytics. In the book, he talks about media analytics as a big field, and he says there are two branches. One is the analysis of users' interactions. For example, the kind of research that is developed in the University of Amsterdam by Richard Rogers, who visited our university 1 year ago, what's called digital method. They analyze a lot the interaction of users in social media, for example. And the other branch is analysis of content. So in that context, we can talk about the distant reading proposed by the people of Stanford, Franco Moretti and his group, and this culture analytics. So it's about the analysis of content. So the idea or the objective of cultural analytics is to identify emerging patterns, to see through the visualization emerging configurations, repetitions in genre, rhythm, form, style, things that are not, we cannot identify analyzing, for example, short samples or a few books or a few images. So we are talking about large amount of images, books, and so on, and to detect these patterns. Here, and by the way, he includes the possibility of doing samplings. That's, I think, I found it strange, we can say, because usually when people talk about big data, they say you analyze the whole universe. But in this case, he talks about sampling, and the limit, the advantages are to go beyond the limit of traditional textual corpus. You know, in the tradition of semiotics or literature analysis, you analyze only a few books, a few works. In this case, you are working with a lot of, for example, images, okay? So visualization is important. So the researcher must get the data, create the visualization, and play with the visualization to detect these patterns. This is very important. Visualization, according to Manovich, is as important for cultural analytics as statistics and data science. And this is key from my point of view. He said that visualization is an alternative analytical paradigm. So visualization is a key word and a key process inside cultural analytics. So visualization is not only at the end of the process of the research when you show the outcome. Visualization is also in the middle of the research. You use visualization for analyzing data. Here is one of the popular images. This is the analysis of 1 million pages of manga, the Japanese comic books, and this is a very well-known research by Lev Manovich. He detected different genres and configurations that are very difficult to detect if you are only reading a few of these publications. This is another very famous project included in the book, the analysis of the more than 4,500 covers of the Time magazine to detect patterns, changes in the configuration of the covers. And another very famous project included in the book is the analysis of practically all of Van Gogh's painting to detect patterns in the evolution of the paintings of Van Gogh. These are only a few of the different examples that are included inside the book. And finally, a couple of ideas and limitations. For example, I think there's a beautiful part of the book where he asks himself if it is possible to think without categories. He doesn't give us an answer, but I think it's a good answer to discuss. He said that in the beginning he was very optimistic about this approach, but now he's more realistic. He detects different limitations of statistical and computational approaches. So, and he also detected limitations of thinking cultures as combinations of elements that we can track. So he's conscious that this is not the magic sword to solve all the problems of research, but I think I agree with him that it's good to explore this approach. He does not discard qualitative research, obviously. He says that qualitative method should be among the tools. At the end, we are talking about interpretation of images, data visualization. So if we talk about interpretation, we talk about categories, patterns. I think that's part of also the tradition of more semiotics and other qualitative approaches. I think, and I conclude with this, I think the previous book, Software Text Command, was more theoretical. In this book, I think it's more methodological than theoretical book. I think that it's still a work in progress, obviously, but I think we still should develop a theory of this kind of approaches. In that sense, the book, the big difference with the previous book is that this one is more methodological and not theoretical. So, okay, that's my intervention. I drop a couple of little bombs. So if you want to start your own presentations, go ahead. Gabriela, it's your time.
Okay, thank you. I will share my screen. If you can give me a minute. Do you see the presentation now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Gabriela, I'm going, this for everyone. I am going to give you more or less, I don't know, 12, 15 minutes, okay?
Okay, okay.
Okay, let's say 12 minutes, so we have more time for discussion later, okay?
Okay. This will be very short, and in English that is so weird that I don't know. Let's start. Hello all, thanks Carlos and Julia for this invitation. Finally, Lev Manovic has collected in a single volume all his reflections and practices around cultural analytics. His research initiative raised in 2007. For who frequently dig into manovic.net looking for methods, techniques, tutorials, and examples, these are great news. We have been following his updates since 2013 when we were surprised and in love with his work zooming into Instagram cities. Since that time, we have learned a lot about cultural analytics because we wanted to do cultural analytics in the Global South. And we did it first with the colleagues of Cátedra Datos in Buenos Aires. Greetings for Julio and Sophie. And then we did it in the PhD at the Tecnológico de Monterrey. So to do that, we had to solve many obstacles and ask several questions. Today, I wanted to transmit some of these learnings translated into 5 lessons, some difficulties, and some questions. A ver, vamos a pasar. So, first lesson is that we can study the culture through data, but the question is, what kind of culture are we studying? As we know, many things we do in a digital environment and some we do in physical space leave digital traces. We can recover them through data and explore them in an aggregated way. Digital traces connect life, data, and culture. Cultural analytics uses traces and other kinds of data to study culture with algorithms. Manovic takes the concept of culture as broadly as possible. Not only Matt Rothko's paintings are cultural objects, items that people choose on Pinterest also are. This vision skips the debate about what is or not culture towards a definition focused on people's practices recovered from digital traces. However, I would like to stop for a second in this concept. For Manovich, the culture expressed in digital environments is contemporary popular culture. He says, tastes, interests, and imagination shared by majorities, he says in page 40. In opposition, analogical collections digitized by archives, museums, and libraries are historical texts, cultures central to the fields of digital humanities. But I would like to ask if digital culture is indeed a popular culture. Due to its communicative function, there is a culture in data. These data have digital materiality and cultural functionality. But I will argue that this kind of culture is mainly an algorithmic culture and a platformized culture. Data doesn't flow in isolation in the digital environment. That data is not only the result of the communicative will of the users. Platforms shape the data to give them forms suggested by the algorithms. I prefer to think that cultural analytics is a good way to study culture platformization in an empirical, visual, and creative way. Second lesson, data visualizations are artifacts of knowledge. Cultural analytics represents the state of the art in production of cultural visualizations. First, we learned that we can find patterns, regularities, cycles, and continuities of visualizations, and that these patterns are emergent. They present a kind of knowledge without previous categories, preconceptions, or conditional hypotheses. Besides that, visualizations are really beautiful and a way to innovate in social research. I like to think in them through a way to get out of the text. They also add new values to visual studies. Proximity or distance of objects in the graphic space allows new possibilities of interpretation, and algorithmic measurement of values provides new knowledge about images, their aesthetics, and also their social use. Finally, pattern identification would be impossible without visualizations. Cultural analytics teaches us that we can do serious research based on images. Third lesson. Visualizations and patterns need some large data scale. To work in cultural analytics, we need some scale of data. Patterns can be misleading or can be apophenic, as Dana Boyd and Katie Crawford call seeing patterns where there are none. The scale helps us to see them more clearly and to avoid the apophenia. But the problem here is that the scale is associated with other issues: infrastructure, access to data, and sample sizes. Labs are the natural environment of digital methods and cultural analytics, but where I come from, you can count labs with the fingers of one's hand. I used to say, my computer is my lab. So my own infrastructure determines my sample size. I process as much data as my software can support, but that never exceeds 10 or 20,000 objects each time. Taking account that Manovic says a reasonable sample size of Instagram should be formed by more of 2 million of images. As Manovic points out, media labs are fundamental infrastructural conditions for good cultural analytics. Another point is the access to data. Over time, platforms have tended to close their IAPs, which are the interfaces through we can access the information they store, or they have put limits on the collection, which makes difficult a large-scale work. The opacity of data processing and the lack of statistics don't help us to determine the adequate size of the sample. Manovic's decision to work with a complete universe is not reproducible in all cases. When it comes to the data scale, we're still in the dark in most cases, we have to recognize. Fourth lesson. Cultural analytics allows us to study images in new and infinite ways. What makes magic to cultural analytics, we can ask. And by magic, I mean visually attractive, innovative, and original. The possibilities allowed by the construction of images in data, metadata, and values give many different options to present them in endless types of montages. Metadata breaks the pictures into parts, and montages assemble them in multiple ways. If we have one unique visual dataset, we can order it by period, by hue, by content, by algorithmic recognition, by shared tags, by network structures, and so on and so forth, obtaining a variety of montages from the same dataset. This process makes cultural analytics so dynamic and so ludic that really we want to decide to do it. We want to do it. Visualization also breaks the opposition between quali and quantitative methods. Cultural analytics are nor quali, nor quanti, nor mixed. They are digital, which means that you can zoom in and zoom out over the objects, forest and the distant and the close reading. The primary value of the cultural analytics proposal is that you don't need to change lenses as in the analogical social research when we have an instrument for the quantitative and a different for the qualitative method. Metadata can be aided by hand, generated by an algorithm attached to the images from its origin, or give an internal characteristic quantified through an algorithmic procedure. Metadata opens new ways to visualize, identify patterns, and make interpretations on images. Fifth lesson. We need more social scientists trained in data science. Social researchers' training is not a prescription, it's a reality not always easy to reach. It is essential to be aware that cultural data are communicative objects, and as such, they need the approaches of social sciences, humanities, and media studies. However, as Manovic points out, we realize that cultural data has been more approached by computational science to a more greater extent than by social sciences. In our words, our objects are moving out of our fields of study. Manovic introduces himself on the flap of the book as a professor of computer science. Well, but how to learn cultural analytics? Manovic's tutorials on visual analytics are handy, and he has been very generous in using open source software and making it available on his website to those interested. I think Manovic is quite inclined to open knowledge, which is an appreciated feature, but the
12
tutorials are not
minutes,
enough.
Gabriela.
Okay. There is a lot of ways to learn cultural analytics that includes reading tutorial, trial and error, learning by doing, per collaborations, and some immersions into a lab. Into a data lab could be very well. So to conclude, I will say in Spanish, sin Manovich no se puede, con Manovich no alcanza. Manovich's works are inspiring and fundamental, but in the world of who are not Manovich, we need to solve many problems to validate our research. Ethical treatment for the data, the answer to some relevant research questions, categorizations that anchor the data to the social, academic journals intended to understand our research, ways of presenting our findings beyond our papers, and of course, a more informed peer review community about research innovations such as cultural analytics. That is why I can only thank the organizers of this event and take us a lot.
Okay, thank you very much, Gabriela. I love this tweet. It's very Argentinian. Okay, it's time for Frederic Guerrero Solé.
Thank you, Carlos, and thanks in particular for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to be invited by a group Medium that once, as you know, was my group too. So again, it is a great pleasure to be here. I'm going to talk about the Manovich book, which I enjoyed, and just saying some things that came to my mind while reading, and with some final provocations that I would like to discuss with all of you and with the participants in this meeting. I think that the Manovich book is an essential piece of work for those who want to understand how cultural productions and creations are analyzed nowadays. It evinces a paradigm shift in the way we address critical questions to popular culture, which is mainly created in digital format and spread through social networks, as is it said in the book. I think that Manovich book, and this is my idea that can only be discussed here, is not only about cultural analytics, but first and foremost, it is about the culture of cultural analytics. A culture that started by the end of the 1940s, beginning of the 1950s. And I asked myself, well, I wasn't even born, yeah? Where were we by then, yeah? 1940, 1950, with the use of the first computers for analyzing text, while we, only 10 years ago, we're still deciding whether the internet deserves being considered an object of study or not. This is why I consider that it is mainly, as most of the books written by him, books and works about the culture of cultural analytics. Having read Manovich's book, I look back to my works in particular, and I realized that they are a kind of cultural analytics researches, not with the power of the researches described by Manovich, with millions of Instagram photographs or billions of posts in Facebook, but a kind of, yeah? And in my opinion, the question is not when will we have the opportunity to do the same, as Richard Rogers does in Amsterdam, but how we get ready for what is coming next. We've lost 7 decades, 6 to 7 decades, yeah, with all fashion paradigms, in my opinion, at least from a methodological point of view, that have had an impact on the research questions we've been doing during our careers. So probably the second great thing I'd like to put here for the discussion is how we get ready for what's coming next. And Gabriela said we need more powerful hardware, and we need social scientists that are using data sets and coding in Python and so on. Yeah, but maybe this is the present, but it's not the future. I still don't know. Yeah. But what I know is that our everyday practices with all these annoying tasks that we have to do all the time, yeah, are impeding us to solving the latter, meaning what's coming next, but also the fact that it's not about the questions that we can answer, yeah, Manovich book, but it's about the questions we would like to answer, but we can't. So we have to get ready for these answers we would like to answer, but we cannot. Manovich's book talk about automation, development, algorithms, software, the word preferred by him. And he also makes evident how media works internally. And it leads him to the conclusion, and this is controversial in my opinion, that his book is a book on media theory. I will develop this idea after. Yeah, the media analytics are used to optimize distribution, to recommend, but also to decide narratives, to create cultural objects, to intervene in any stage of the communication process, from ideation to reception and recreation. Yeah, the cycle, the cycling of culture and popular culture. According to him, the data of the past is constantly used to define the present interaction of people and machines with other people and other machines. He talks about anticipation, about prediction, that are the key objectives of the new interface with which people interact. And these software processes have an impact on the communication process, on the results, the effects at the individual scale, and obviously must be addressed by and researched by scholars. Manovich also evinces how media companies are constantly experimenting with the users and the data provided by them to know everything that can optimize the businesses and improve the user's experience. Yeah, he's also aware of the difficulty, if not impossibility, of analyzing everything in the web. Of course, an idea that will come later. But the questions are there. He asks himself how blog writing has evolved in the last 15 years. Who can be so bold, so brave to ask these kind of questions? Yeah, maybe only those who have the capabilities and the methods to solve them. But I still love the questions. Yeah, how can you analyze 7 billion photographs in Instagram? Manovich stresses the fact that often the same analytical methods used in the culture industry to rationalize and refine content and communications can be used to do research and to interpret cultural effects of industrial media analytics. My reflection here is that in this sense, collaboration with these industries, social networks, digital platforms, video games industries, is almost mandatory. Yeah. And obviously, besides this data scientist knowledge, what is the background and the specificity that we can offer to these industries? Obviously, in my opinion, research questions and our own knowledge. But Manovich also talks about the asymmetry between the powerful industry with thousands of workers coding all the time and the independent and lonely researcher. Another paradigm arises here, that is that one of the summarizing Manovich words. I cannot access all such data. Yeah, meaning that we have also to struggle to fight for having this data, because we need to have it if we want to make and to have to make good conclusions about what's happening and what's going on there. He also talks about the commercial tools that are not for cultural analytics, and consequently we are forced to develop our own tools. Yeah, I think that this is an interesting and unresolved question. And he also talks about another question that it's more cultural. Yeah, the effect of these industries of algorithms and the effect in particular in the homogenization of the cultural production, which I think that is interesting, and we can talk about these processes of homogenization, heterogenization that have happened in the past with different waves, movements, counter movements, seeking for social differentiation, progress, experimentation, and so on. So here I would conclude all the, let's say, the positive things I have to say about this fundamental piece of work by Manovich. However, having started reading the chapter 4, here is when, I don't know what will be your opinion, where I find that the book and Manovich's proposal has more weaknesses. Yeah, when he approaches sociology and media theory, I think that he somehow fails. Yeah, in the definition of the categories, he's going to use this cultural data, media behaviors, interactions, and events. Not sure about this taxonomy. Not sure at all. Yeah. His work has few references to sociology of communication. Obviously, he talks about Bourdieu, Lazarsfeld in many occasions, Adorno and Horkheimer. I still don't understand why. Yeah. Later, Hall, Bruns, but not McLuhan, not Goffman, not other Mirovich, not Boyd, not other essential authors. I'm just saying 4 of them, but I could list dozens of them that have contributed to the study of media and communication and have not been mentioned. I don't mean that he has to go back to the old and sometimes old-fashioned scholars and in media theory, but well, I think that it's somehow weak. His approach to media theory, in my opinion, is weak. The same for the cultural sampling. Yeah, it starts with some interesting proposals and approaches. But first, I think that in some parts of the book, one has a feeling that the author is possessed by a kind of enlightenment man, yeah, whose desire is to analyze the all, everything. I'd like to have all the photographs taken by that camera, old camera between 1930 and 1945. Well, I said, okay, you have to be brave if you want to ask this kind of question. Maybe some of these objectives finally make no sense or are close near to the nonsense. Yeah, he's right in the discussion about the canon, but the key question here is how is that we come from a highly hierarchized culture and are in a cultural production that has to be hierarchized by the researcher who looks for a representative, balanced, systematic, high quality, significant, and reliable sample to describe the everything. As Carlos said, his criticism of the random sampling is debatable. I think that his argumentation in relation to statistics, Manovich fails again, yeah, talking about some non-relevant things such as the mean as a failing statistical method, since the value does not correspond with any of the values of the sample, and he forgets that still exists the mode for the purpose and the median, and afterwards he mentions the median and mode, yeah, but it's not a good book. I would say it's not a good book for statistics. Yeah, when he enters statistics, well, I have a lot of doubts in this sense. Okay, so
12 minutes, Frederic.
yeah, only for the conclusions. Yeah, so if I have 2 minutes, I will say just 2 things for the conclusions. I want to mention, as Carlos did, the question in the conclusion about whether can we think without categories or not. Yeah, because in my opinion, it incarnates an idea that is in tune with this theory about the end of theory, the end of isms, in particular Marxism, yeah, the end of categories. So well, my main, that it has been also proposed by the big data thinkers, yeah, this end of the theory. We don't need theory, we don't need preconceptions, we don't need categories. Data will explain everything. Theory is dead, long life to data. And my provocation is, maybe the question is, can we think without thinking? In conclusion, a fundamental book on the culture of cultural analytics that seeks, however, a kind of neutrality in the analysis of massive popular culture that has to be obviously discussed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frederic. Now, Manel Garin, endavant.
I'm so glad that Frederic mentioned some of the issues that he had with the book, because I was afraid that perhaps I was going to be the troll in this book club. As you know, many of the people who are here were viewers of Lost, Perdidos, and there was a pretty interesting book club in Perdidos with the others, Juliet, Ben Linus, but there are also trolls, no, in book clubs, and I didn't want to be that person, like really. But Frederic has sort of paved the way and helped me, because I want to reinforce and discuss from a different perspective, from the perspective of visual culture, of cinema, of comparative media, if you want, some of the issues that he has mentioned. My presentation, I decided to go old school, so I basically used paper. My presentation is going to have 3 parts. First, I'm going to say why I'm here, why am I supposed to talk about Lev Manovic. Then I'm going to focus on the problems of methodology that I see in this book, and then on the political, ethical issues that I have experienced by reading this book. But since I don't want to behave as a troll, and I do agree with Carlos and with Gabriel and with the first part of Frederick's speech, that this is a book that actually signals, it points, it underlines key issues, key questions, that's true. But I don't buy the way am I suspicious, and I think it's pretty unfair, the picture that it creates around culture and around the humanities and around the methodologies that have been studying that with specificity and with, I would say, some political conscience. But I don't want to be the troll. Why? For 2 reasons. I myself have applied and have battled and defended within film history circuits the use of quantitative methods, specifically tying them with visual motives. And throughout the last 5-6 years, there is a conference where film historians for, I would say, good European universities gather. And we created, for a project called A History of Cinema Without Names. It's not the same thing as without categories, as Frederic knows. No, it's different to think without names than to think without categories. We had a panel, a permanent panel about quantitative methodologies. And some very key people like Marta Boni. If I had to name a key researcher in the Université de Montréal, Marta Boni, who studies popular media, culture, TV series with quantitative methods, it's her. We gathered there and we discussed. So I had an interest, an investment in reading the book. And the second reason is for Manovic himself. I remember very well when I read The Language of New Media, what the book meant for me and how I defended it with debates with, let's say, some of my more purist colleagues, people who didn't understand the kind of controversies that Lev Manovic was pushing towards. People who thought that he was just trashing Dziga Vertov, using cinema to speculate and play the fortune teller about new media. And I thought that was good because it was challenging some of the established hierarchies of film historiography. And I still use, like 2 months ago in my contemporary cinema aesthetics class, The Language of New Media and some of the provocations that he had there. But I think The Language of New Media was a much more specific, narrowed, focused book. Here, I agree with Frederic, and now I'm going to get into my first big complaint about the book, and that is the relation between data and content. Where is cultural content? Where is cultural specificity? Can we actually ask the right critical questions about stuff if we want to cover it all? Aren't we going to be more superficial? And sometimes, obviously, and I should moderate my language because we are recording this and all that, but kind of in a very limited way, in my opinion. How are we treating the cultural artifacts? Are the claims that Manovic makes in page 113 about selfies and close shots, or the claims about Van Gogh, or the claims about manga, do they hold from a cultural specificity perspective? Do they hold? I think they don't. I think they don't. That doesn't mean that the questions or the methods or the things that he's trying, and I think this guy, he tries to be controversial always, no? Doesn't he? Like, he succeeded. That's why we're here discussing and talking. But I have a problem, again, with the insistence of saying all the time scope, size, and all the time I've underlined the word, the amount of times these words appear in my book. My copy is like a palimpsest, no? All, everything, all, everything. It's trying to map it all, no? I'm leaving the colonial political issues with that for later. Now I'm only dealing with the methodological ones, okay? Is this sound? For me, there's a problem with the book that The Language of New Media didn't have. He does not devote enough space, enough word count to prove to the reader that his analysis of the cultural artifacts is right, it's good, it's interesting. It's just going, you know, very superficially on the verge of name dropping, and please don't make me go to the pages where he names Foucault. Suddenly, I now discover that Foucault is a positivistic thinker. Oh, thank you, Mr. Manovic. The thing is, there are other approaches. Franco Moretti's book about the quantitative methods, no, applied to literature. Exactly, Carlos. In this book, the author combines the all-encompassing, broad, wide perspective, and this game is played here. Okay, we want to play all culture. Okay, but then Moretti devotes 5 pages, perhaps, to one case, and he goes deep into it, and he makes you feel that he knows about that stuff. Whereas here, I'm afraid, I'm so sorry, but it is what it is. I didn't feel this with The Language of New Media, but I have to be true to my opinion about the book, and this is what I am saying. It's very superficial. In the case of, and there are other examples, Giovanna Fossati and the people at Amsterdam and the Eye Film Museum. They are doing this in depth, and they are trying to speak about all cinema, but they prove that they can be culturally specific, that they can go deep into. No? For instance, Cinemetrics, very suspicious that the project Cinemetrics from the University of Chicago, the greatest project of cinematic quantification, is not even quoted in the book. But Barry Salt and Yuri Tsibian, who's also a Russian, fight to the States, they can prove when they want to be specific. They can really go down into the cultural aspects and then zoom out. This book does not do that. We have cherry picking, and you are all familiar with the term cherry picking in data selection. In the case of Van Gogh, Manovic here presents the results, and he only quotes, as the representative of traditional humanities, a sentence from the website of the Van Gogh Museum. Excuse me? Shouldn't you do some sort of literary review of the different perspectives of many film historians, and many of them are not hierarchical, people who are, you know, comparing, doing different things? Can you really document this and show me that the humanities are so, you know, hierarchical or conservative? Because that's not the real picture. At some point he says, I explained something, and one guy in a conference, he said that in a Q&A, that Instagram shouldn't be researched. And in my opinion, Manovic is using that to make a case against the humanities. That's not the people I see in the humanities conference. That's not the people that I discuss with. We are all way beyond distinction and Bourdieu, and we are already challenging those categories. Like, we are thinking about the hedge funds, the money that is financing the distinction, the social and the art categories. So please don't try to sell something as thorough, no? Another example. The 11th year, the Ziga Vertov movie, and he literally says, page 235, I found an unconventional way to sample the movie. What? Just balancing the relation between average shot length, the duration of shots, and a plano secuencia, a long shot. This is done by many researchers for years. It has been done for a lot of people. It's very mainstream in film studies. It's not an unconventional, just because the picture of it in your super maxi screen looks nice, looks amazing. So I have to moderate a little bit my view, but I really think this is a book that can be a little harmful because it paints a picture that it's unfair. People who, historians, archivists, they are not, using the old categories. People are changing and implying and using quantification in different ways. But at least methodologically, and now I'm going to shift towards the politics, methodologically you have to prove that your method is sound. You cannot sell the manga case, like really? Like you don't have to be Eiji Otsuka to identify that just counting the darkness or the more light or poor, it's a very poor variable, a very poor way of understanding manga. There are layouts, distances, type of gestures, traces of the characters, shapes of the eyes, the mouths, many different traces that can be quantified. So when they go deep into them, I think they're pretty obvious. Same thing with the Time magazine. We've been working with front pages in the visual motif research project here. The questions that are being asked are very superficial, in my opinion. But they paint a methodologically unfair picture of the humanities. And that's my main sort of claim. Let me use one of the metaphors that Manovic coins in the book, page 100, the ocean versus the islands. And the basic point here, Carlos, Gabriel, and all of you have read the book, it's we need to look at the big ocean of big data and not just the islands. My first question is, what's wrong with the islands? I like the islands. But then the complex question is the ocean about big or is the ocean about deep? The ocean is the category of colonial culture, of imperialism, going to as many ports as you can to sell or extract, exploit as many cultures as you can. But this notion of thinking about the ocean like big misses the point. The ocean is depth. It's depth. It's all the different systems of life, like in Abzu or in the films of Jean Pellevet, all the different things underneath the ocean. It's not just the bigness of it. I'm going to try to close the argument with the political aspects. Trying to map it all, to look at all the ocean, for me carries a sort of panoptic, and this is a word that he uses at some time, but a dangerous panoptic logic. Even if sometimes, of course, Manovic, an intelligent researcher, he sometimes lowers the claims. He says, no, okay, we don't want to be a panoptic and we don't want to be, but actually he's buying all that logic in terms of the politics, the ethics. There is this presumption, this hubris of totalizing the world, of being able to control it all. There is a moment, actually, in page 209, where he's actually saying the moment where I understood what's underneath the book. Given the size, 2 minutos, Carlos?
Yeah, no, we are in 12 minutes.
Okay, great. Given the size of many digital media collections, even simply seeing what's inside them is impossible. And it's like, okay, but the thing is that you want to see them all. You want to have them all, I want to see it all instead of allowing many other people to see parts, historians, archivists, social researchers, to see different parts and explain the different parts. What's wrong with culture being multiple, plural, minor, not completely understandable, not completely mappable? What's wrong with that? The totalizing project in terms of culture has a very strong precedent where 19th century world exhibitions, Exposition Universelle, that grid of the booming capitalism to using technology in the world fairs, in the world exhibits, map the world. This colonial project, Archives de la Planète, there are many different examples of when they want to map it all. And map it all has this logic of power, of conquest. Frederick mentioned this. I think Gabriela, in a way, mentioned this when she criticized some of the cultural aspects. ¿Qué cultura, no? Which cultures? Where? I don't know. Leave culture be? perhaps, live cultures in plural be, perhaps. I hope I'm not being too, unfair with the book. As I said, it's an author that I'm interested in, and I will keep using the language of new media in my classes. But the politics, let me frame it in another logic. Is it possible in a moment, Carlos, 1 minute, no? Okay, un minuto? Un minuto. Is it possible that this book does not quote Donna Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto? 30 years after it was written, the most important political written in California, text about technology and culture from the perspective of feminism, of gender. Is it possible? Is it possible that it doesn't mention Abby Warburg in the whole visualization section and the comparative panels of images? Is it possible that it doesn't mention Ito Steyer, key writer of the images and visualization and the political problems of images today, or Xian Engai? To use Xian Engai terms, this book for me sometimes feels like a gimmick. The gimmick of technology to pretend to be able to map it all. But what's underneath that? Ya acabo, Carlos. I hope it wasn't too trolly, but this is what I feel about this book. It's really fresh, and it doesn't mean I'm not saying it doesn't introduce interesting concepts for debate. I'm saying that it has a lot of methodological, cultural, and ethical biases in it, and we have to discuss them to be fair with Manovic and with the book. And that's pretty much what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Manel. So now it's time for Francisco. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Everybody can see me?
Yes.
Yes.
And
Yes,
hi,
yes.
and thank you for being here today. As you will see, my point of view is a little more optimistic. And, well, my presentation will cover the concepts of media visualization and its use in research. Everybody seeing the same?
Yes.
Yes.
To perform visualizations, we usually apply primitive graphic symbols like points, lines, and rectangles to represent information. For example, in a pie chart, the data filters are translated to the size of the circle, and we choose the colors of each part. Media visualization surpasses this methodology and proposes to transform the cultural data filters into a new object which maintains the media of the original object. As Professor Manowitz says, pictures are translated into pictures. For example, the frames of a movie or a collection of movies. Applying this paradigm, we will find two ways: an artistic area and an exploratory area. The first one illudes that a graphic must be readable because it is art liberated with media. The second one, and the more interesting for research, is called exploratory media analysis. This point of view, based on the very important work of Taki from the 70s, is related to the use of visualization to look for patterns on large media datasets. As Taki said, a graph can show something still unseen, but as I explained before, the picture, the graph, is made with the media or an extract of the media itself, not a representation with lines and points. At this moment, I'd like to point out that everybody can do cultural analytics because there are many free cultural databases and many software available. Maybe if you want to do some media visualization, you'll need some technical support, especially if you want to work with huge datasets. But in my point of view, technology is here to help, not to be a limit. In addition, I think that the exploratory side of cultural analytics is still in a nascent stage. If you want to find some new knowledge, maybe we need to move slightly from the experimentation with technology to the understanding of the results. To better show how we can acquire new knowledge, new scientific knowledge, applying media visualization, exploratory media analysis, we just need to take a look at the three concepts of science. All graphs made with data allow the extraction of scientific concepts. If you have quantitative data, that is a metric concept, you can extract classificatory and comparative concepts. In an imaginary pyramid of scientific knowledge, the metric concept is on the top because include the other. And visualization, all kinds of visualization, can represent these concepts at the same time. And this is a visualization of a very small data set from the project 1 million manga pages, nearly 1,000 pages of the manga Anatolia story. Normal dendrogram hasn't, but almost every visualization has quantitative data, because to visualize we need spatial coordinates. In this case, the x-axis is brightness and the y-axis is the entropy value. Entropy is a concept original from thermodynamics and refers to the disorder of a system. Well, how to find scientific concepts in this image? Firstly, we get the metric concept. This is very obvious, although cultural analytics usually works with bigger data sets. Then we can extract the classificatory concept, because each page has a different position. There are some overlapping, but we can classify it using the entropy and the brightness values. And we understand that there are a class with more data than others. And finally, we can get a comparative concept, because the same spatial position shows the difference between the darkest and the brightest. For example, as Professor Manowitz said, in this example, it's hard to state about an homogeneous style. In statistics, those very entropic, those very extreme values could be considered outliers. An outlier is a data point that diverges from the observations and sometimes is excluded from the data set. But for us, this deviation could show us where we must do some close reading. For example, doing some discursive analysis, or maybe applying natural language processing to seek for correlations between image and text. In any case, the visualization is indicating us where to focus. And the more relevant for media visualization is that we see the science concept in the spatial position, but we also see it in the real features of the object. We can do a classic scatter plot, which would show the same distribution, but if you do the same with primitive symbols, you lose a cognitive effect. To explain this, it's very useful to remember an experiment mentioned by Thomas Kuhn in his work, The Essential Tension. Jean Piaget was a psychologist, and he conducted a cognitive experiment with children. He did races with two toy cars, blue and red, and he was changing the conditions in every race. For example, when the speed and when each car started the race. When Piaget asked the children what car was fastest, sometimes they said, this one. Why? Because it arrived before, it won the race. But sometimes the children said, this one. Why? It didn't arrive before, it didn't won the race. Because I saw it, said the children. They understood a phenomena, what car is fastest, avoiding data about time or distance. This concept of cognition in experiment was very important to Kuhn. In media visualization, you don't need to believe in the underlying data, because each feature of the real object is maintained in the visualization. You don't need to believe, you don't need to state that this space is brighter because the point is more or less separated of the rest. You see the difference, and this is a great strength to do research. So, what is the contribution of, in my point of view, what is the contribution of cultural analytics, and more especially, what is the contribution of exploratory media analysis to the research community? To answer this question, I would like to remember the words of Benjamin Franklin. When the first hot air balloon demonstration was conducted, someone asked, Mr. Franklin, Mr. Franklin, what is the use of this? What is the use of people flying for people to fly? And Mr. Franklin replied, what is the use of a newborn child? We are in a similar situation. Every new discovery pushes the research to multiple ways. In my point of view, Professor Manovich is opening the door to a new dimension of possibilities. And I know that this will sound very Mandalorian, but this is the way. Technology is here to extend our research to new frontiers. I would like, this is a very short presentation, I would like to conclude my intervention, my presentation with this very positive reinforcement. As I said, I feel more optimistic. Thank you, everybody. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Francisco. Now it's time for questions. We have different approaches, more apocalyptic, more integrative. But okay, do we have any question, Julia? I have a couple of things we can start discussing.
Yes. We have, I think, 2 comments for Manuel.
Okay, and avanti.
Manuel, thank you very much for your presentation. This is a comment from, please correct if I'm spelling your name wrong, but Helmut Torres Contreras. I also believe that this much better, deeper, and a colonial and totalizing vision. What vision of objectivity is there here? I feel a resistance to theory and epistemology. Data scientists are realizing that algorithms are operational, but we need experts to interpret the data.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I see that also Jorge Caballero has written there.
Yeah.
I want to clarify, Francisco, and those of you who know me, that I am a very optimistic and positive person, and I cannot live without humor. And that's what I made this joke about Lost and the troll. But for me, sometimes there's a problem when we cannot be critical. I think we have to, feel empowered and feel sure about criticizing aspects that we think are not correct or are not sound. I think we don't have to be afraid about challenging aspects. And this is the whole spirit of, I think, of this talk. I said to Carlos, si encima viene Manovic, I'm going to be critical. And he said, it's fine, it's what we do. So that doesn't mean that someone isn't optimistic or positive. On the contrary, I am very positive. And not apocalyptic, Carlos, because as I said, I've written and I've researched with quantitative. I agree with you, Francisco, that technology is here and we have to use it. But I think we cannot forget the lessons, like Donna Haraway said, or Sianengai, the lessons, the cultural, political, the relations of power tied to technology. There are relations of power everywhere, no? Also in the fact of, are we more men or more women talking today here, for instance? And I am a man saying this. That is a relation of power. And technology and algorithms, as we know, they have biases. So in terms of Helmut, I think maybe Frederic could answer what you are saying about theory, because he criticized the aspects of media theory. And in the case of Jorge, maybe we can find a place to debate this. But even in this book, when Manovic mentions the anecdote of Vertov names, it's wrong. He says Russian and it's Ukrainian. And if you ask someone who really has research into Ziga Vertov, someone who has really felt and researched through Ziga Vertov could never embrace the sentence in page 242. I leave it there, Jorge, and maybe at some other point we can grab a cup of coffee and discuss. It's true that he, of course, knows the Russian emigres like Judith Sivian in the US, but what is the perspective that he's bringing to new generations of the work of the avant-garde in the 20s? What the critical aspects, the social aspects, the three Kaufman brothers, not only Ziga Vertov, the three brothers, no? and also the younger one who went to work to the US. Like, what is the real logic underneath that? Perhaps we would need more time, Jorge, and this is not the place. Frederic, do you want to answer to Helmut, the theory thing, or maybe Carlos?
I'll try, Manel. Well, I'd like to say that I'm optimistic too. Yeah, using humor as much as I can. But I agree. I totally agree with you and Manel. It's been a long time since we haven't spoken. Yeah, you and me. But I think we share the same idea about Manovich, more or less. You with your knowledge and I with mine. I'm not saying that statistics, algorithms, and visualization are not useful. I said it's a fundamental book and it's showing us the way in the same sense that Francisco said. Yeah, I started by saying, well, Americans started doing this in 1940 while we were here in an impoverished country, yeah, after a civil war, and who started talking about the application of software to humanities and to communication? When did we start doing this? 10 years ago, 15 years ago? I mean, in our environment. So I'm very positive, I'm optimistic about that. However, what I don't like, and I would criticize with Manel, it's this kind of pretension of neutrality. Yeah, I don't understand it. Data don't explain everything. Algorithms and software don't explain everything. And visualization is just a part, a beautiful one, let's say, for explaining popular culture and in particular massive. So we are doing this because we don't find other possible ways to say something about millions and millions and millions of posts or of photographs or pictures, whatever. Yeah. So my only concern here is, okay, you are again one of those who wants to forget about theory, because he is always with this Marxism obsession. Yeah, everything that ends with ism. Come on, everyone has its points of departure. We have our way of thinking, and it has an influence, and it will always have an influence on our perspective, the way we look at the object of research, and obviously the conclusions that we take from our researches. And again, to be critical in an algorithmic culture is almost mandatory. Yeah, it's about what you said, the hierarchization, the power law distribution, the distribution of the power, yeah, which is different, yeah, but quite similar. Well, this was more or less my point of view about Manovich book.
Thank you. We have a question about first Antonio Matei asked to. Okay, you can ask your question, and then we have a comment by Sophia Alam.
Okay, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, perfect. So first of all, I totally agree with the idea that Francisco said at the end in the last intervention, because I think this is the new style of researching cultural stuff, actually. Yeah, and of course it has a lot of flaws, this book and Manovich research, if you want to read it as a theoretical approximation to cultural studies. But I agree also with what Carlos said at the beginning. I think that it's more methodological than theoretical, this book, and I see its importance as a tool in researching this kind of stuff, because of course if you go through the political stuff or with the different theoretical approaches, it will have a lot of flaws. But I just read it and I realized that it's an important tool. About what Manuel said with the gesture of some characters in the manga, for example, or in the comics, of course you cannot analyze everything, but I think it's important to do the picture, and I think he succeeded in it. I don't know what you think. It's only that appreciation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I know if very short, Manelo, Frederic, you want to answer because we have more comments here by
I
Sofia
think
Alamo
thank you
and
for
Jorge again.
thank you for for talking actually, because it's nice. The chat is okay, but listening to your voices is much better. We would all feel in a different way if we were in the same room, no? And we sometimes forget that, discussing, no, and balancing this. I think the book has succeeded in making us discuss. Probably it has also succeeded in making us buy it, no? But what I mean is that we are already in the debate, and I think Manovi would already like and enjoy that, no? But that doesn't mean, no, that there are areas, aspects that we cannot discuss. And I think now in the situation of COVID, when we are like, I think most of the people, I guess, I want to think in this event, we have realized, no, about how this maximizing, totalizing, speed, let's get it all logic is bringing us all, like the planet, like the environment, like power, like politics. Like we have felt that. And that's not saying, oh, let's get rid of technology. It's not that. It's just, let's try to learn from our mistakes and maybe becoming, as Laura Rascaroli, one of my favorite film scholars, Laura Rascaroli says, becoming minor, maybe it's not that bad. And we can use technology to go, no, research in depth, combine different perspectives, collaborate, it's fine. But this kind of totalizing drive, and I think it's in the book. I think no one who has read the book, and I ask you, Antonio, no, can deny that there is a totalizing aspect in this, the idea of wanting to map it all, wanting to have it all. It's constantly referring to himself, to his lab, to when he did this, to when he did that. There is no humbleness. I miss the humbleness of the researcher and the historian in this book. But at the same time, it's interesting, it's fruitful, it will create debate. Yeah, and that's why we're here, I guess.
Thank you. We have a comment here by Sofia Alamo. She said, well, we cannot avoid the fact that Gabriela Sued has highlighted that cultural analytics shouldn't be understood without understanding algorithmization and platformization of culture. I don't know if Manovich is consciously aware of it, but we as researchers should be. And then we have one more question by Jorge about, it seems to me the Manovich approach is not the extermination of categories, but the emergence of new ones, based only on visuals, right? What do you think? I would add something here because as I said at the beginning, in traditional research, visualization was at the end. Now we create the visualization and we look for patterns. But this construction is a human construction. We are analyzing an image constructed by humans and algorithm. So I don't know if we can consider this as reality. Obviously, it's not reality. It's not raw data. It's transformed data by us. So I think consciously, unconsciously, categories are working there when you are creating these beautiful images. And that's one issue. And the other thing, just to continue, we have still more or less half an hour. In the beginning of his presentation, Francisco described two ways of doing visualization: artistic media visualization and exploratory media analysis. And I think that Lev Manovich is in the middle. It's a combination of artistic media visualization and exploratory media analysis. So I think he moves in the middle. So sometimes I think if we read the book only from the scientific point of view, I don't think if it is the right position for reading these books and many of his works. So because I always say he moves one foot inside the scientific environment, one foot is outside in the world of expositions and artistic, and I like that. I like that because that is fresh air inside media studies. So I don't know if you want to say something about this idea of the categories, if we can create something with the categories, or what about that? I don't know, Gabriela, if you want to add something, yes?
There is always, I think that there is always a categorization, but Sometimes it's not a human categorization. Sometimes it's an algorithmic categorization. You have to measure. I don't know. For example, matiz or brillo, matiz or brillo, and that is the measures of the algorithmic image G, that is the software that makes the measure. And image G can extract with the script of Manovich, that is image plot. Image G extracts matiz and brillo and some other values that now I can't remember, but there are categorizations from the possibilities of the software, from the possibilities of the measures on the images that software can make. So humans don't make categorizations, but algorithms that's the categorization. The same is with the computer vision. We sometimes highlight the possibilities of computer visions, but computer vision software like, I don't know, API Vision, Google API Visions, or so on and so forth. But Google API Vision is using the dictionary created by the millions and millions of images written by Google to make the searches, the recommendations, the issues of publicity, and so on. So we are reading with visual computer software without human categories, but with commercial algorithmic categories. So we can't use that software without analyze which means that software and what are the limitations and the possibilities of the software. I think that is more or less fair to highlight the possibilities of algorithmic software and diminish the possibilities of humans. You can first to analyze what possibilities allows the algorithmic categorization. Sometimes are very good. The human eyes can't make a classification very fine on hue, on matiz, on brillo values. So this is a very good addition to the human eyes, but the human eyes can see the power, the domination, the social protest, the mobilization, I don't know, the other social values. Computer vision doesn't recognize social protest as social protest. For example, for making an example, so you have to equilibrate, and there are always categories. There are, if you blindly replace the category of the humans by the categories of the algorithms, sometimes is missing. The algorithm has to help the human eyes, not replace the human eyes.
Thank you, Gabriela. I have a problem with the connection, so I lost the chat. There was a question by Helmut about the categories. I don't know if someone can read the question or the comment. It was not a question, but it was a comment.
Yeah. She said that the categorization is often not theoretical, but on the part of the metadata and transactional data to build analytic metrics. Data sets are used to validate what the computer learns.
Thank you. I want to complete the idea before when I said in the beginning, traditional research visualization was at the end, and now it's more or less in the beginning or in the middle better. But in traditional research, the questions were at the beginning, and now they're supposed to be almost at the end because you create the visualization, you start playing, and listen. So, and this is also one of the issues that Franco Moretti's raised about this, in the sense that he said, yes, we can analyze these beautiful databases of books, but we don't have questions. The questions arrive later. So we can see a complete disorganization of the traditional path of research, where we used to ask questions, then to create a hypothesis, then to test it, and at the end we have the visualization. Now we have the visualization in the beginning, then the questions arrive later. So I don't know. And where's the theory? That's the other issue. Where is the theory? So I don't know if you want to add something. Jorge said, yes, the logic of artificial intelligence, that categorization is hidden. The neural networks are black boxes, and we discovered those categories afterward. Oh, we already have a good discussion in this book club about black boxes about 6 months ago. It's another key concept, critical concept. I don't know, Frederic or Francisco. Francisco, do you want to add something?
Yeah, about the end of theory. We need to separate the people who speak about data science, like Anderson, and the people who really do data science. And I think that data science are like hobbits, because there is a little magic or no magic about them. In my point of view, data science is people who work very hard, and sometimes they find some knowledge. But Mr. Anderson, editor of the Wired magazine, his point of view is to sell magazines, and the point of view of Manovich is to promote, I think, experimentation. And for example, Manovich had a controversy with Robert Kosara, and Robert Kosara was ex-sponsored by Tableau, the famous software platform. And of course, the point of view is different. My point of view is I want to do research. I want to do experimentation, not research. I have a lab, a great big lab, and I want to do experimentation. I want to extend my academic point of view. And this is the same with data science. If we only read the gurus of data science, is a problem. If we learn about the people who work hard with data science, the point of view is different. This is just my opinion.
Okay, thank you. I share again the link to this famous article, series of articles by Wired magazine. It was published 13 years ago, the end of theory. But we know that Wired magazine, they used to kill everything. The end of the web, the end of blogs. They are always killing something to sell more magazines. And we have about 15, 20 minutes. I want to ask a question. How can we introduce this kind of research in undergraduate and graduate courses? Because it's a big challenge that how we can upgrade our programs, how we can include this kind of research in our different classes. You, Gabriela, you have experience in Argentina and Mexico, and well, Frederic and Manel here. So also, well, in this case, Francisco can be very useful because he's working in the professional environment. So how can we accelerate maybe these transfers of methodologies into the scientific academic environment? Okay. If you want to answer about this, what do you think?
Yes. We are making some experiences. We make last year with Noemi Lugo in Tec de Monterrey, looking for studying YouTube as cultural analytics. And now we are making some experiences in UNAM, mostly on Twitter. And I think that students have many curiosity about these methods and about what is happening inside the platforms. So I think that digital methods and cultural analytics are good way to start to think in visual ways sometimes or not, in what is happening inside the platforms. I have to say that we are very specialized to study about social platforms, not about digitized objects. Although we have a course on digital humanities, but I think that I take the curiosity of the students about cultural platforms and social platform as an starting point too. But I had to add, as I was saying, I had to add other elements. It's not only cultural analytics, and of course it's not about closing other kinds of methodological exploration. With Noemi, we work together on ethnographical explorations and data exploration. It's not to close other methods. It's not to, of course, to transmit that we have to study all the universe, all the things, and this totalistic feeling in Manovich discourse that I can notice very well, of course, is to start from the curiosity and from a systematizing technique to go into the social platforms that I like to these methods to transmit.
Okay, thank you, Gabriela. As you mentioned, Noemi, and she asked to talk. Okay, Noemi, go ahead, and then we go back to Frederic, Francisco, and Manel. Noemi Lugo.
Hi.
Hola, Noemi.
Hola. Do you listen to me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I think that Gabi said many things that we did. Well, I raised my hand before Gabi spoke, but for me, people studying bachelor's degree are very curious and they have an open-minded, and even if they study theory, they have this advantage of being like, yeah, more open and without all those theories when you present a method. And I think we have to make them more able to think not just in theories, and I don't want to say that we don't have to use theories anymore or teach theories, but I think we have to teach them more methods. And a good thing that happened in the course that Gabi mentioned, that it was a communication research course that is in our new program, is that we have these questions that Gabi proposed, that there are questions about things happening on platforms, but since the beginning, students had questions about the platforms. So the vision of critical platform studies that was there, and it was very nice to see that even very young people from studying their third semester was able to discover things about platformization and about the way that interfaces work, because they were helped to see that problem. So in many times when I do peer reviews or in master's degrees, people ask questions about what is happening in Facebook about I don't know, any topic. But if you teach students since the beginning to go further and to have a deeper view, they can make it. And actually they did a very interesting work about terraplanismo. They contacted one of the teams, it was the best team. They contacted about 70 terraplanists in Facebook to be able to ask about their vision. And I think those students in their third semester, their vision and their methods and their way to do research is going to be very different. And I can contrast, bachelor's degree with master's degree, and I see more curiosity, openness, and creativity in methods in bachelor's degree than in master's degrees.
Okay, thank you, Noemi. While you were talking about bachelor, we have another conversation in the chat about the order. If we have first the questions and data, or before data and then questions. I don't know if you, Frederic, Francisco, Manuel, you want to add something about how we can imagine or how we can introduce this kind of research in our undergraduate and graduate courses? Any suggestion? Should we teach our students to program Python or stuff like that? I don't know. Can you share something about your experiences? What do you think?
Carlos, Frederic is not here.
Okay. Okay.
Had to go.
Then
He had to
Manel
go.
and Francisco.
Yeah.
No, I think, was it Noemi? Because I'm not familiar. Was it Noemi? Noemi's point was very fruitful, I think, and key and interesting. And that's precisely what it worries me, and what I think we really have to discuss this, and in multifaceted, also in political ways, because precisely there are less prejudices and more, I would say, knowledge and more drive and desire to learn and to combine and compare things in younger students. And I'm not talking from the perspective of theory. I'm not a theoretician. We work with works, with art, with cinema making, with filmmaking, with music, in my case, music for audiovisual media. So for me, and this is the key with the book, there is a moment when he mentions Histoire du cinéma, Jean-Luc Godard's Histoire du cinéma. But the thing is, he mentions it in a way that is completely opposed to the possibilities, the nature, the energies, the empowerment in Histoire du cinéma. So for me, this is also a big responsibility when we are working with undergraduates and all the stuff we do. What idea, what ethics, what politics are we transmitting? And what are we actually sharing? And where are the limits? And how does that relate specifically to our situation in the world? Gender-wise, class-wise, race-wise, when that it's in the specific context where that it's. So yes, I think precisely because they have less prejudices, this is perhaps the only thing that frightened me a little bit about this book, that I think really the target audience is not us. It's definitely not the researchers from arts and humanities, I think, or other people. I think it's computer science, English-speaking, Anglophone bachelors who are gonna rule the big tech companies in 30 or 40 years. And that's what worries me. It's like, what are the ideas and what are the concepts and the positions in the world that we are sharing? And it's, I think, what you said, Noemi, about platform critique, and questioning, and learning and making questions about that. But do we have a responsibility, open data, open science, but do we have a responsibility in the way we transmit things? My answer is in line with what Antonio Matei said in the chat, and also Anna, this idea of collaboration. For me, I have to thank Carlos and Frederic actually for this, because they were moving a project before Commit here at UPF, and they mixed some people from the Department of Communication and Film and Media and the engineers. And I had the chance to meet and collaborate and prepare a project, but sadly COVID has stopped it, with the two lead researchers of the image processing group, Coloma Ballester and Gloria Aro. And that kind of collaboration, for me, it starts with an ethical moment. Like, you sit in a table, you look into each other, they ask you questions, like from the perspective you come from, what are your data set, what are visual motives, show me the book, show me the things, okay. But there is also a human understanding. And I think this is key. Look into the eyes and say, is this people that I trust to work with and to quantify and to large and to create and to monetize a methodology? Or is this people that I don't trust? What is your political hand, your position? For me, the biggest lesson for me from this book has been that from now on, I will really question to share my ideas, my knowledge, my whatever, as limited and pathetic as they are, because they are not big ideas or anything. But I will really think, do I want to share Wartburg's visual motif, gestures, critical? Do I want to share that methodology? Do I want to share the data sets of thousands of movies that we have in the project? Do I want to share this with that people? I mean, are we speaking the same language in terms of the world, in terms of what's going on with all of us in the world? So I think this connects with the new generation aspect that Noemi was underlining. But there's a responsibility, I think, in all of this.
Okay, thank you. Here we finally, Mon Rodriguez participated. A question about ethics. He said, well, finally, he said that we should teach ethics to students parallel to data science tools. I completely agree. What else? We have different comments, links. Confidentiality is something that must be also taken into account, said Juan Primosic. I don't know if we have any more questions, or because there are so many issues to discuss, we have different. Oh my God, Noemi, why don't you talk?
Sorry, that was an enter, but it was for my paragraph, not for. It was a comment I had before my other comment, and I was not going to put it, but it was an accident. No, well, I think I'm going to read a bit instead of. Well, is there? I think he's not soberbio. I don't remember the word in English. I think he's a generous researcher, and I think this book is very similar to other works that have been not that have been solved, but it's like Instagramism. And I see this book like not a theoretical book, but a book like saying, look, this is what I am doing. I am experimenting. I am sharing on real time, that I think is a very good thing about research. Instead of waiting, it's like, this is where I am now. I remember in the New Media Language book, he actually separated digital culture from new media aesthetic studies. And for me, it was surprising to see that now he went like with cultural analytics, he wants to place it together. It's not, I am an unconditional fan of Manovic, but I think he's very innovative, and he's questioning categories and things that we are like have been doing in the communication field for years. And for me, it's not, let's not be Manovic, all of us, or make these studies, the communication studies, feel like absorb it. But I think like what really is what Gabi is doing in Latin America for me is very important, because it's okay, let's use it, let's practice, let's discover what happened when you do it. Let's have a global South perspective. Let's have a feminist perspective, like Manel was saying. And I think then we have to read other authors, like Latin American authors, like authors in Spanish. But I think in Latin America there is work being done. I just read. I mean, I am not an expert. I am entering into these discussions right just a few months ago. Again, thanks to Gabi. But I think Ignacio Siles, for instance, or Trere, or other authors that are in Latin America are not being read, and nobody say anything about them today. And they are talking about all the things that you are saying, and maybe they are, you know, this approach about critical platform studies are there. So that's my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
I won't talk anymore.
Thank you, Noemi. I agree with this profile of Lev Manovic as an explorer. I think he's not Alexander von Humboldt. He's more Cristobal Colon, in the sense he's looking for new things, exploring. I don't know if Emmanuel will agree with this, but I think the good thing of books is that when they activate different kind of conversations, and I think this is a good example. So we can conclude here. Thank you very much for your participation. This video has been recorded, so we are going to share it in our website. We are going to tweet and publish the link in a few days. So thank you very much for participating in this activity of the Medium Research Group. we try to organize we try to discuss a book and a chapter and a paper practically every month. So follow us in social media, and thank you very much. Good continuation and good readings. Thank you, Manel, Frederic,
Thank
Julia,
you. Thank you,
Gabriela,
Carlos.
Noemi,
Thank you.
Francisco.
Thank you for
Also
the
for
invitation.
allowing for the critique, Carlos.
Bye.
Oh, obviously.
Thank you.
Yes, that is important.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take
Big
care.
hug. Take care.